And I can assure that everything we are going to discuss is not going to be anything about greenwashing, but actually, in reality, exploring what really green technologies mean for the world, means for us, and how we can utilize innovation to make the world a better place, not through policies, but through alternatives and transformation. So without further ado, I'm really honored to start. I would say probably a very brief introduction on the speakers, and I will leave I will probably, suggest to start by Sonali.
Pleasure to be on this panel. I'm Sonali, and I am leading Panthera Capital, which is based in Dubai. And we are an investment arm of Fujairah Holding, and we invest in PE and VC. VC, earlier stage tech-enabled startups in this region and in India. And in this panel, I'll share more about the type of green tech startups that we've been working with, looking at, and what sort of technologies we are finding exciting.
Hi again. I guess most of you know me already, but anyway, my name is Oliver Pulley. I'm the advisor to FineGap, the battery company, which will change the world, make it green and efficient. I'm an investment banker by degree. I'm coming from New York. You might know it from my accent, but I'm still German. And I'm honored and happy to be here. And I'd love to discuss with the other panelists and everybody of you the aspects of investing in sustainable energy projects, or any project, whatever you prefer, which you think is sensible and sustainable. Thank you.
Maher Al Kaabi, I think you've already heard my introduction yesterday, but very shortly, independent board member at Circle Group and many other companies, work with the ministry, sits on the advisory board of Circular Economy, the Ministry of Climate Change. Also look after the program of helping the next generation on building venture studios. I had the benefit to work in venture studios since 1993, and those I think very, very important, and several other entities I work with.
Fantastic. Then I will probably suggest to start from the first question for Sonali. So we can start from that side. What are your investment focuses at the moment in terms of green technologies?
So I think there are two major sectors in green technologies that we are finding interesting. One is energy, and the other is everything revolving mobility, decarbonizing mobility. So in energy, what we found interesting, one of the things that we found interesting is basically efficient energy storage systems, because when you talk about renewable source of energy, then the supply and demand are periodic. They don't match. And so there has to be a way to store all this energy until it is used in the demand. And the systems that have come these days use AI to be able to do that. So that is one that we are finding extremely interesting from a long-term perspective, because these sorts of technologies we feel over time are going to be the future. The second in the same space are where you're combining AI with robotics, so robotic autonomous systems. So for example, we've seen one in the solar energy, where these are autonomous hardware bots that are used to clean solar panels. Because otherwise cleaning of solar panels is quite a job and quite an investment. And for a very manual industry like energy, they still end up doing it manually in one way or the other. But these hardware bots are able to do it through a bot using robotics and AI, and they claim to be more energy efficient and can help the power plants recover energy by using these bots. The other thing that I mentioned in mobility, electric mobility, we are invested in two electric mobility companies. One of them is around creating more EV form factors from scooters, bikes, vans, trucks, and buses, using them for different sorts of purposes. And the other one is in creating charging infrastructure, which I think is the backbone for having EV, change the ecosystem as a whole. So these are some of the way, the technologies, the green technologies that we are seeing are shaping the future.
Fantastic. And talking of future technologies, I would say, Oliver, what do you see as the upcoming trends in the space, and how can they transform the landscape of?
Well, as I said, our battery, what we presented here, will change the world dramatically. Think about, we all have 5, 6, 7 devices we carry around. We carry cables, we carry plugs. Everything is packaged in plastic, so that's environmentally very heavy. So having a battery which you don't have to recharge, where you don't have to carry around cables, will totally change the environment. But then I had a discussion with some of you outside, hydrogen in comparison to electric vehicles, as you just said, especially in transportation, bigger trucks, bigger entities like planes or trains, they will probably have a need for different batteries, and the hydrogen cars coming in place. Hydrogen, as you know, is a very explosive material, so it's kind of dangerous. Then to harvest it, it's also not that easy. And the biggest problem, as you said, also is the grid. Where can I get it? Where can I refuel? That's probably the demand for the future, to see how we structure that. If we have batteries as small as our battery we presented, you can carry it around. You can take it on a plane, you can take it in your pockets. That's easy. But hydrogen, I'm very sure that for the heavy industry, hydrogen will be the solution for the future. But for the single use, for everyone, it will be the batteries. Think about your own household, how many things with little batteries we had. I spoke to a mother, she's back there, of a little child, and she's always worried that her children open the toys and take the batteries out and do something with the batteries and then eat the stuff inside. I mean, that's deadly, what's in these batteries, toxic, totally. And if a small baby or a small child swallows a battery, you have a serious problem. Our battery you could more or less eat, that doesn't matter. But think about what is inside the batteries. Then also one thing what I believe needs to be changed, and I guess you will absolutely touch that picture also, you have to think about these millions of people who dig with their hands in cobalt mines, in lithium mines, in graphene mines and everything, under the devastating environments they can have. They have no breathing protection or anything keeping them away from dust. They work when they start to be 5 years old, doing this in this environment just to give us these materials. And then you have to realize also, somebody was already touching this scene, I think you spoke about it yesterday, that these materials do not exist to the end of time. They are getting less and less and less. So our material is self-made. There's nothing digged out of the ground. So that will definitely change the future and enhance the capability of the entire world to be electrified. I mean, none of us can live anymore without a cell phone. My cell phone was damaged yesterday and I had to get it repaired here in Dubai, because without this device, I'm lost. And I think all of you are the same. So thank you for that picture.
Then I will ask to Maher if you want to add some trends on top of it, and what is your view about future technologies that are coming?
Sure. I think, first of all, let's get aligned. When we talk about green technologies, we're not only talking about renewables, which is solar panel and all this thing. That's only one part of it. But the ecosystem has to be green. So we're talking about buildings has to be green. Water desalination has to be green. The biodiversity. Using the water itself has to be in a green way as well. So it's the entire ecosystem. So let's not stick only that. So if you compartmentalize that thing, let's talk about the renewable energy, which is the green technologies. So what's going to be emerging, hopefully, despite their negative impact? The green hydrogen and the pink hydrogen. Today we're talking about gray hydrogen, which is getting extracted from the gas, and that's why it's called gray hydrogen, which is the cheapest way to do it. In the future, it's going to be green hydrogen as we work on, and ADNOC, as a company, already started investing in it last year. But there will be also pink hydrogen, and just to remember, pink hydrogen is anything to do with extraction when you use nuclear fusion. So that would be another trend. Now, what's also very important to note when the trending is happening, How do you store this technology? Today, the battery capacity has a limited capacity to store it, and that's the problem. Although it has improved over the last 20 years now, but futurely, you need to even have it even more smartly for you to be stored, and capacity should be smaller. So for example, the battery you talk about, which is very, very small and all the thing, we need to have something, technology like that, where renewable energy can be saved as well. That's one trend. The other trend, the block we need to talk about, it's the carbon capture. The CO2 which is already in the atmosphere. Now there are two ways to carbon capture happens. One is the biological way, planting trees. So trees automatically takes off all the CO2, gives us hydrogen, CO2, oxygen, right? The other way of doing it, which we also dwelled about it yesterday, is the carbon capture itself, chemical processes by having plants. And I also mentioned yesterday, ADNOC built the second phase of carbon capture last year, which was announced on September 7th, 2023. But there are good benefit of carbon capture. Although it's a nascent technology, but it has been happening for quite some time. There are three big main companies that are in the world. So you can carbon capture, and it goes through 4 stages of process, and then you actually come up with CO2. You can heat it up and put it into pellets, and then you take this pellet and store it under crust. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, you actually then mix it up with oxygen and hydrogen, and then you actually come up with a fuel. And then you can use that fuel in the vehicle. Now you capture the carbon, and the carbon got released by the car. This is called carbon neutral. So that's another trend. Another very important trend that we need to watch is use of technology, AI, and digital twin and so forth, for your smart gridding. The grids that we have today in the world today, they're still very traditional. The smart grid's probably less than 1% globally, unfortunately. And probably will develop later on as well how the smart grid, using the smart grid, will actually reduce your energy requirement by at least 25% easily, just having a smart grid. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely, and the potential of disruption is going to be incredible, and it's a great time to be alive and see these technologies emerging, of course, with challenges and risks, and that's why it's great to keep the conversation open and very circular from multiple stakeholders, investors, technologists, and all the, even the guests that are in today's room, because we can all add value and play a role into this, and in a way we will, whether unknowingly or knowingly. Then I will ask to Sonali, perhaps, what do you see in terms of vision for this, the GCC, this transformation, and in a way also perhaps the challenges that these technologies might face?
So let me actually, the challenges that we see from an investor perspective that these technologies face, especially when it comes to either raising funding or demonstrating the impact. That's not just GCC, I think, that's just in general world over. In fact, in GCC, I think there's much more imperative in trying to measure impact and generate how to generate positive outcomes. But in general, I think the challenges faced by this industry are one, long, unstructured B2B cycles. So if you see it from an investor perspective, that becomes a concern because, green tech companies have to go through pilot tests, and then that pilot test has to work on a small portion of the end client, and then there is scope for upselling, etc. And all of this basically requires, it's actually dependent on a couple of things, like whether your solution is user-friendly or not, to get human adoption or at the other side, seamlessly. Because if you see at the end of the day, the type of industries that are getting disrupted through green technologies are very traditional, old industries, infrastructure-based industries, and so the way of working is, traditional. And so to be able to disrupt these, the solution needs to be very hands-on for the end user to start adopting and using. So these long, unstructured B2B cycles, I think that is the topmost challenge. And as an investor, we go in and analyze very carefully how they are, what is the conversion of pilot tests versus upselling. And how many, how much portion, what percentage of the end client are they able to capture through their solution. So that is one. The second is, like I said, that these industries have very manual sort of work. What is the level of adoption? Because the adoption in general in these industries, I think, is long term. It is going to take time. And so that sort of patience needs to be had from all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, including investors. So we select what sort of startups we want to invest in, at what stage they are, so that we are happy with taking that risk in that that comes with this slow adoption. In general, with green technologies, the pace at which things work and get demonstrated is slow. So I see that these are the main challenges from an investor perspective.
And from the other side, from the innovation perspective, what challenges do you see, Oliver, in the space, not just in the battery space, but also in green technologies, climate technologies?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. The biggest problem is that it's all long, time-consuming trends, and they need to be tested, proven, and so on. And then always new technology evolves. And as an investor, I mean, I'm in this field now for 35 years. My father does it for over 60 years. And it's always hard to choose which one is now better. Is the Airbus a better plane than the Boeing? Is the Tesla car better than an electric Mercedes? Or is any green tech technologies? We're planting wind turbines around the world and think that is totally sustainable and green. But out of what material is this wind turbine made? Do they rust? Yes, they do. Do they kill birds? Yes, they do. Do they make sounds? Yes, they do. So is it really a green and renewable project? Not really. Then we're harvesting the oceans. Same story. We're harvesting rivers and dams. We're building dams for water. Is that a green technology? Yes, it is to some degree, but to other degrees, you might have heard there's an entire city washed away in China because they had a dam reconstructed. There was an entire city gone just to have the new dam a little kilometers further on. And then sure, we have new materials as our stuff, as other stuff. Things which are not even being thought about only 10 years ago are today totally normal. If you ask a little child, can you use a tablet? They're 2 years old and they can use it. When I had my first new tablet, I didn't even know what to do. Yeah? So how does this work?
And teach us things.
Yes, and I
not
still hate the Apple gadgets. Yeah, Apple, you don't know where to touch it. I don't know. So we're facing so many challenges, and then especially as the other lady was talking before about the emerging markets on the cryptocurrencies, money will be gone at some point of time. That's also very interesting from all the people who came as in the UEAs, CTGs, or behind the red curtain, where they went from monies, from coins, to credit cards on one day. For the rest of the world, it took long from coins to notes, from notes to checks, from checks to credit cards. That took us an entire generation. And if you are from, well, let's say Kazakhstan, we have a lady here from Kazakhstan, I think, then you had yesterday notes, and the day after you had an online bank account and a credit card. And first of all, you said, what are you going to do with the credit card? So, yeah, we're facing so many challenges, and we try to be green. That brings me to one more point, and then I'll hand it over to you. A lot of companies who are absolutely not green, take BP, they have a green logo, and they're buying CO2 bonds for billions of dollars to make their CO2 balance more green. But that's fake, and we all know that, but they still do it. And so I think there's a lot to be done also. And we will trade emissions. It's already trading, but it will be way more in the future.
Since he's mentioned BP, I need to interject over here. I already mentioned it yesterday. They're not even paying for the credit. For the last 10 years, they got free credit for $200 billion, all the fossil fuel companies in Europe, and they were not even tasked to come up with renewable energy. So this is how double standards are really going on.
Yeah. And well, I am a big fan of Ray Kurzweil, if someone is familiar with this name. And talking about AI and new technologies, he's saying that probably within the next 15, 20 years at most, everything we know about society is going to be completely changed, including economics, money, governance, and not just AI that is coming, but also AGI that is on its way. When it comes to challenges, Maher, you have probably the deepest experience here with AI than anybody else. What do you see as challenges that you see in the development of AI, and more specifically also in the GCC related to AI?
I think those here in the UAE, particularly in Dubai, will probably see the government is actually pro-technologies overall. So we had an assembly of AI just a few months ago, last year. And prior to that, we also had the Metaverse Assembly, September 2022, was the first city to announce that assembly. So government is actually much faster in adopting a lot of things, despite a lot of people are using AI terms on a loosely terms. But if you look at the government today, they're in forefront actually adopting AI. And I think we have a very good problem in Dubai, whereby the private actually trailing back and trying to follow the government sector. So the government sector is going ahead. With my experience that I've been working outside as well, the rest of the world, the private sector always lead, the government follow. So we're blessed that we're always blessed that we have great leadership who are forward-looking. So this is for us is really moving very fast. So AI is not a thing. We are already working on our own journey in the group to build an AI and predictive model and also digital twin. So I don't see the problem. But if you look at a macro perspective globally, I think the fear of singularity, that's there. If you look at the 6 steps of singularity, people are really worried, and the fun part will start only on the step number 3 of singularity, when you actually have robot, half human, half based on what people assume, half robot, right? And then it goes back up again, people thinking of AI taking over the world. So that's where end of the singularity will be. However, the fun part as well to singularity being there, the AI will be able to do things faster. So the chipping that we want to do today, it's taking a time to do it. So AI will be able to design it very fast. So maybe the overarching challenges is, how do we regulate this? Now, if you speak to people who want to deregulate the entire world, they will be against it, right? But I always say it like this. We as human beings, if we don't have something regulating us or holding our moral anchor, we will kill each other. We'll be on each other's throat. And what's happening in the world today? We have leaders who are actually allowing people to be killed. Children, well, this is not a political talk, but that's a fact about human beings. They're on each other's throat all the time. So we need sensible regulations. We need to work with the government, and our government does that very well. They work with the private sector hand in hand to make sure that we have a regulation which is conducive for the technology to thrive.
Yeah, there are so many subtopics that would be fantastic to explore, but of course, unfortunately, we don't have the time at the moment, but we'll be glad also to talk about it later on in the break. And it's interesting also the concept of the increasing computing power, both for AI, but also human beings. So part of the singularity events that also Raymond Kurzweil is mentioning is the increase of human computing power, where he says before 2025 we'll probably reach 1 million times the computing power per person because of the merging with technologies, so the transcendence. And it is happening in a way. Today we have the smartphone outside our body. Maybe in 5 years' time we'll have already things being integrated with all the controversy and challenges connected to it. And when it comes to consumption and energy consumption, one thing that is not mentioned that often is that the consumption that AI requires and the limitations that we have as human beings with the current technologies to power such intelligent machine. And the more the computing power grows, the more energy consuming and demanding will be. What's your take on this? Who wants to go first?
I'll just add to what you've just said and then continue with the answer. Yes, the computer power will go 10 to the power of 10. It's going to be that fast. I know we were seeing that also outside. Yes, it's an oxymoron when you talk about computing powers and also climate change. But it's not really that, because AI, or let's say technology, will actually help of you to reduce the energy utilization. I'll give an example. We have a concept of a consumer. As we consume energy. So that's a consumerism, what you call methodology. But what they're working on today, there's a model houses where they're trying to be prosumer. Prosumer means that you have your own renewable energy in your home, and if you have excess of that renewable energy, you'll be able to sell it to the smart grid. So you're actually benefiting from that energy. So AI will be able to help you. Let's get into a little bit more example over here. If you have a smart grid, and you've got a city block, and you're able to look at all the data which is available, and you get to know how much energy is utilized per hour, per day, per month, different type of seasons, when the sun shines, when it's cloudy. So you know the requirement of every single home, what's the peak and the low hour. You're able to actually distribute energy as per requirement and not make it one flow. So you actually distribute it as per the requirement. So the AI or predictive modeling will be helping you doing that. So now you use the power of data analytics and AI, machine learning and AI to actually reduce the power consumption by minimum 25%, just if you have that. Now that will happen only if you have proper data, people managing those data, and then you have as well the smart grids and the algorithm which just keeps on checks in. So if you do that with those smart technology, you'll be doing it. Look something beyond that as well. When it comes to agriculture, those who live in Dubai and UAE probably heard that last year we actually planted wheat in Sharjah. And these were the wheat which was not the generation that we're currently running at. The current seeds are 8th generation, i.e. they're genetically modified 8 times. So they're extremely harmful for your guts. They're not really good. That's why we have a problem with our guts, because of the seeds that we eat, right? So they went back to 1800, 1600 seeds, original seeds, and they planted it in a weather which is very hot hours. What did they do? They used blockchain and AI to track back the seed and the watering technology to make sure they only water when it is really required based on the weather conditions which were there. So they reduced 50% of water consumptions by using the AI technology in a weather like us, which is extremely hot during summer. It can go up to 50 degrees. And the first harvest was amazing. And I know a friend of mine who has a bakery who bought a lot of stock of it. And when we eat that bread, it's just so amazing for the health. And you don't feel it in your gut as well. It's so amazing. So that is the power of AI, and using it across making a city very, very smart, where you can conserve energy.
Actually, these are some great examples, and I'm just going to add a little bit to this, that predictive diagnostics, something similar to this point, is predictive diagnostics in energy sector. Is only possible because of AI. To be able to predict these 1 million signals that happen in an energy plant, you can imagine, is like finding a needle in a haystack. And so an AI solution that's powerful enough, effective enough to be able to analyze all this data and tell you exactly where the root cause or the problem is one only possible because of AI, and is probably not possible with every type of AI. So it really depends on what that company's solution is able to claim in its product. And so what we see as an investor is, what are the financial implications and product claims that this solution is giving to the end client. So for example, if I'm saying that you're going to have this much increase in your revenue or this much reduction in your losses, what is the added investment that you want me to do to be able to achieve this? And if that number is really high, then the whole point of having tech enable an industry would go away. Because then this traditional industry not only needs a really high intent to digitize itself, to try something out, but also have an army of financial resources to be able to implement. And so AI also is supposed to, a good AI solution is supposed to give you all of this benefit in reduced costs. So I think that's another power of AI that it brings. So this autonomous robotic solution that I was telling you about before, what it does is it has an amazing pricing system for its end client, So what it says is that we are going to have a revenue share in all the added revenue that you're going to generate because of our solution, which means they have skin in the game, right? And that to an investor, to an end client, is a very powerful way to say that please try our solution.
But there's also one point I wanted to add. We absolutely agree, and I also want to state your point. We're now talking about quantum computing. Quantum computing takes much more power than any other.
You're actually basically taking your problem and getting it and giving it to China.
Yeah, outsourcing the problem and being the mandate of the issue. Well, I didn't introduce myself, but for, I think, a lot of us, we know each other. Our focus is at Futura on intentionality as well. So everything we do is for the greater good. And we look at systemic change. And we see, of course, intentionality being one of the biggest challenges for the future. And that's why we are also, in a way, talking about coordinated decentralization. So in a way to shift power from being centralized to be a little bit more shared, so that even responsibilities can be shared. And in a way, trying not to have the same bottleneck with policymakers in some countries in the world. But when it comes to intentionality, perhaps, Sonali, I would ask you that you might have more direct experience with investors. What do you see? Do you see demand and saying, we want to solve problems, we want to put capital to solve problems despite having perhaps lower returns, or we will not accept lower returns, we want to have comparable or higher and doing good at the same time?
So I would say that, and the investor perspective has gone, it has sort of evolved. And the way it has evolved is that earlier, and it works on both the sides, on the startup side as well as on the investor side. So on the startup side, if we see green technologies, let's say, even 4 years ago or 3 years ago, impact could not go hand in hand with financial metrics. It was like either you have impact or you can make money. So literally, it was very bipolar, and hence the investor perspective was that, we need to have that, mandate to be able to invest in green technologies, and we wouldn't just invest in green technologies out of our normal mandate of investment, etc. Whereas how it has evolved since is that now more and more startups have realized that actually only when you create financial metrics along with impact is when you can have more impact. And so having financial benchmarks attached to your impact startups, to your green technology startups, is beneficial, is a win-win for all stakeholders in the industry, including the end solution that you're trying to achieve. And so that works for investors as well. And so, more and more investors have now started investing out of their normal mandate into green technologies, because green technologies have a much brighter future. They are much more sustainable. They have a real product. It's not just like a lot of tech products that are, probably, I wouldn't name the industries, but something that is just in the air. It is an actual asset. It is actually sustainable. It is actually long-term, and hence, a much better way to get your return on investment over a period of time.
Yeah.
So the moment we start treating, the moment everybody in the ecosystem starts treating a green technology startup as a normal startup, that needs to have, and if you think about it, at the end of the day, how do you measure whether an impact has happened or not? Just like how do you demonstrate what you have achieved as a KPI in financial terms, the same way you need to demonstrate even an impact, So everything is measurable, and the moment you treat that as a yardstick, I think all the stakeholders have an agenda or an incentive to be part of the story.
Yeah, and also the longer vision that projects in the impact space can have. So it's not just a short term hitting the market and exiting, but actually creating sustainable revenues for decades. And as we were hearing from the project earlier about the prosthetics, there is also a return on impact, but also a return on economics and the economies, local economies. So they showed us that they have $1 for every dollar invested, there is $9 in return for local economies. I think perhaps, Oliver, you have done something, you have some metrics as well. And it's unbelievable sometimes the multipliers. I mean, which industry, which segment gives you a 900% on something nowadays. And
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so actually in impact startups, it's not just the financial benchmarks that you're getting or financial KPIs, but also impact KPIs. So from an investor perspective, if you see, it's, you know, you're getting two things instead of just one that might or might not happen. So it becomes even more powerful if we look at it that way.
Absolutely, and that's why it would be key along the way to invite more and more stakeholders, not just investors, but even governments, in saying for every dollar you are investing here, you are getting actually an economic growth of X amount. And even beyond technologies, like we were looking at mental health solutions for employees, for workers, and for every dollar you invest in mental health, you get $4 in productivity and results. So people are happier, workers are happier, economies are better. It's a win-win-win type of mentality.
Right. Absolutely.
Additionally, there's one point. I mean, we're now all here talking about startups. When the startup ecosystem evolved, nobody was taking care of it. Nobody. At that time, I lived in New York, KKR, Goldman Sachs, you would be in and out of the door with a project which was not at least $50 million heavy. And today, Goldman Sachs, I think 10 years ago, started an initiative called 1001. So they were willing to finance 1001 startups with $1 billion. 10 years before, everybody would have laughed at you on the Wall Street and in the investment banking scene if you would have said an investment bank will finance a startup and then make it sustainable or impact investing. They would say, look out of the window. They are starting to jump again. Yeah? Unfortunately, or fortunately, that totally changed. And as you just said, even governments now are interested in it. But also that's because of the market totally changed. We have so many unicorns that we all know now, whether it's Jeff Bezos with Amazon and so on. And this is why even the biggest player in the financial market said, let's have a look at this guy with his bookworms. Who knows what happens? And Tesla, he was laughed at. Maybe you don't know, he spoiled more than $20 billion before he got the first car on the ground. 20 billion were already gone. And then the first car was on the ground. And now he's one of the biggest car makers in the world. Unbelievable 20 years before.
Absolutely, and there are many reasons to be optimistic as well about the changes that we are seeing, and one of which is the fact that the us and them type of mentality, it is disappearing more and more, especially with the younger generation, because now, as you were saying, for example, about the UAE, 90% of the people here come from different countries, yet everyone talks as we. There is not the separation of us and them as we might have seen 50 years ago. And we can see this in many countries, even countries that are at war to each other. If you talk with the local population, they say, they are the same people as us. And in a way, globalization had many challenges, but some benefits, one of which could be this. Yet, we still see that there is, in a way, technology is evolving in a self-organizing manner. Rather than coordinated. So worldwide, even ecosystem, and we had experiences with venture builder. You have been one of the pioneers of venture builders. In a way, there are organizations that are trying to match multiple stakeholders, connect interests, align visions. But we are not seeing yet these at the global scale. But what is your perspective, Maher, on this?
Directions are different. That's the challenge. But I'll just quickly comment on building the ecosystem for startups. The country over here started building ecosystem since 80s for startups, starting with Khalifa Fund in Abu Dhabi, starting with Mohammed bin Rashid Fund for SME, young SMEs. Today it's called Dubai SME. So it has been in forefront of the vision of the leaders that we have today, how to support the entrepreneurship, how to support the startup. The word startup was not there, but it was entrepreneurship, because we want to make sure that people are understanding what entrepreneurship is all about and support them. Now, how do we make sure that we collaborate? And if you remember my last slide before we had the fun of actually going through the AI or deepfake, thing, I was talking about how do we collaborate globally. We need to have someone taking a lead, first of all, from regional level, and then taking it all the way to the global levels. Like the UN have we today, right? They do many things together, whether right or wrong, but they do it collaboratively across the globe. We need to have something similar to that for all the technologies that they work together. Now we see pocket of people coming and working together. We all heard last month when Biden actually flew all the way to UK to look after the regulation of the AI, which is a good forward step. But how do we make sure that we make this forward across the globe? So we need to have pockets of regions coming up together and going all the way and create that, I would say, an umbrella, which will help us to make sure that we have a unified, a standard way, not to curtail the technology, but to have a direction, where can we go safely for the human beings? And those are very, very important things to do. And I know a lot of people would not like regulation, but I already mentioned it. It's a regulation in a sense of that we all work together in an ecosystem. I still believe, despite me seeing whatever I saw in the world, being across the globe, the UAE Dubai system works really very well. And I also mentioned a lot of examples. We don't issue policies just like by sitting in the ivory towers. We engage with private sectors, we talk to them, and we actually co-create the policies, and only then we release the policies. And that's why we have been successful. Are we perfect? Of course not, because we'll keep on learning from our mistakes and keep on improving on every now and then, different things will come up. We will make mistakes, and that's the nature of human beings. We'll make mistakes, but we'll take a calculated risk in order to make this happen. So I think we're going back to overall, how do we create that momentum globally that we can come together and work on these things before the threats comes on us?
And I think we are already starting it even by having these talks and these events. And of course, on our side, we are working on these technologies. So how can we connect all of us? How can we coordinate?
You're working on a technology which is amazing, to be honest with you.
Thanks, and really for the greater good, and everything we are doing is going to be open sourced so that everyone can access it. And as you're saying, the benefit of not necessarily creating regulations, but even guidelines among experts, because that's one of, I mean, we heard about blockchain earlier. One of the shortfall of blockchain, unfortunately, has been this self-organizing, emergent type of innovation where there were no frameworks, no guidelines. It was the Wild West. And anonymity, in a way, prevented also accountability. But creating environments where everything is transparent, everything is shared, creates also a sense of accountability, both moral and perhaps financial, if investors would then decide not to invest in technologies or companies that are not being coherent. I don't know how much time we have left. I'm not seeing a signal, but if we have time, no, we don't. Okay. Fortunately, I asked. Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask if there is any question from the room, anything about green technologies, intentionality, AI. This is the right time to ask.
And all the three questions, please don't remember.
Yes. Otherwise, perhaps I would have just one more question, which is on the policy-making side, what do you see in the GCC, the situation? Like, do you see forming a common vision and shared mission, or do you still see that this is not going to happen in the next 10 years?
I think it's going to evolve. If you look at it, the GCC started somewhere in 1982, right? And that was a common vision. How do we have this bloc work together for a greater future where we are all united in what we want to do? And if you look at the unity that we have among ourselves, despite our challenges, despite our differences, but we have more common culture than not common, right? So there's a lot of has been done. I mean, one of the recent example, now they're talking about GCC EU-like visa permits. That tells you all of them are thinking forward together, so people can come in to any other country by just applying a Schengen kind of visa. So that's one thing. We do collaborate on a lot of matters, like, together, but you can see those are probably happening in the background. And that's why you see fostering of information, collaboration, sharing of information, and how by companies going and investing in Saudi and Bahrain, Kuwait and Oman, and together, this is how we're working out. We're working on a couple of projects as we speak in Qatar, in Bahrain, the same thing in Saudi as well, and we're expanding. And this would have not been possible if we don't have the acceptance from the respective governments and the alliances that we have today. So, of course, it's going to be every country going to think about themselves, which is a normal, natural thing. But when it comes to the overall good, you'll see them actually marching forward and making it happen.
And I think this is one of the things that is attracting different organizations, people from all over the world as well. For example, Oliver and the new technologies that are coming that were not necessarily born here, but people are seeing that the speed of development here is 10x what you might see in Europe or in other regions of the world. Well, I don't know, Oliver, if you want to comment on this.
As I said before, I think just the whole region, as of the prosperity and the drive, especially the vision of Maktoum and all the other leaders, opened up a field, a playground for entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial spirit. Let's say the American dream, what was always there, the one guy who becomes from a dishwasher a billionaire, that was shifted over to here. This is why all of these amazing buildings are here. The Museum of the Future, Burj Khalifa, Burj Al Arab, and so on. These were all dreams, and most people were not even to comprehend these dreams. And I was just reading a line by Maktoum yesterday at the View, the tower, and he said, most people cannot even dream big enough, but we make it reality. Here we are.
Yeah, hopefully more sustainable than the American dream in the first version, maybe version 2.0.
I'll tell you why it will be sustainable. When we bid for the Expo 2020, a lot of organizers believed that we're going to talk about the airports we have. We're going to talk about the buildings that we have. We're going to talk about the ports we have. We never talked about any of that. We talked about development of human beings. We talked about our judicial system, how fair it is. We talked about everything to touch with human beings. And that's why we won the Expo 2020. Not because we had the largest Burj or we had the largest airport. We did not talk about that. So our file which we submitted, it was all about building humanity, bringing humans together. And that's why we built, and we won that Expo 2020 things. So if we actually invest in humanity, this is how it can help us. Our forefather, the late forefather Sheikh Zayed, may Allah peace his soul, he said it's all about human beings. You can build the biggest thing of anything you want. But if you don't have the right mindset, you don't have the right people driving it, it will never happen. It will be short-lived. So with that, I believe there'll be definitely longevity of what we want to do.
And actually, just to add to that amazing point, if we see startups and the way the imperative has started with the government a few years ago to get imported innovation in, as well as pump up the local ecosystem as well, to come up with more and more innovation. A combination of that has actually led to this accelerated pace at which the ecosystem here has thrived, to the extent that a lot of startups and big startups that have become big companies from outside have been coming here to either expand or to acquire so early on, because this startup ecosystem is not like the US or the other established markets, which is literally the last time I was at Stanford entrepreneurship program, where I saw an investor write a check to a startup who did not have an idea, who had failed 4 times, and he said, just because he's failed 4 times, I'm going to write a check for him. And this was 2002. So in 2002, the state was already that in the US. So when did it start? And literally this region has started, I would say recently, as compared to what it was. But if you see the flow of international, or the interest of international innovation as well as funds for this region, it has been phenomenal. And we've seen that only grow over the past year, much, much, much more. And from a startup perspective, if you see, any startup that comes into this region makes it a point that it has to cover the region. It expands into the UAE, it expands into Saudi, into, all the major markets, which also shows that, the point on alignment of GCC as a whole.
Yeah. Well, since we are running out of time, and it's wonderful to hear these refreshing perspectives, and actually thanks for all your efforts and the courage that it takes to lead and to pioneer and to make mistakes and to learn from it and sharing it. I would say a round of applause for the speakers.